Hello and welcome to our Halloween night video. This one we're going to be talking about John Carpenter, his filmography as a director. Now we're going to have a bit of a interesting video here. We're going to talk about his directorial filmography, and we've got a few different things we're going to look at here. Myself and my co-reviewer, The Core, are going to talk about all of his films and some of other bits and pieces as well that he's done from a different point of view. And then I'm going to cut away and cover my physical media collection of his movies. That's in part one. Then part two, we're going to come back straight away. It's also available now as you're watching this. And we're going to continue talking about his directorial filmography. And then I'm going to cut away for the end part of it. And I'm going to talk about my physical media collection of his soundtracks that I've got on record. So, I hope you enjoy this. I hope you're having a good Halloween night if you're watching this the day this goes out. And yeah, let's finish this year's 10th annual Halloween special for Brand X Reviews.
Right then, so I think we're recording now anyway. So, past videos that we've done leading up to tonight on Halloween, we were talking about mainly the Alien and Predator movies, and I opened this year by talking about Halloween Ends, which of course is a John Carpenter sequel. He didn't direct this, he just kind of produced Halloween Ends. And every year I think we try to work John Carpenter projects into at least one of our videos. So this one, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to do a bit of an overview, just talk about John Carpenter movies in general. And there's plenty to say there. So I have The Core.
Yes.
So we've done like plenty of videos in the past. So I think some of these things we can kind of skip over anyway, because we've done it like to death elsewhere, like talking about The Thing, for example. But I've got his list of films up here going sort of from the beginning. So there's a bit of a guide. We'll just go chronologically through his movies. And I've seen them all, apart from Elvis, I think. But a few things about him. If you watch a lot of interviews with him, he's had a lot of fairly cool concepts about like horror movies that I think he's brought into a lot of his. He tends to do a lot of films where they're usually about like the average guy who is in a very unusual situation. So some films it'll be a very extraordinary character like Snake Plissken from Escape from New York, or even Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China. He's like a larger than life character. He's as big as the movie that he's in. But a lot of other films that he's done, it's usually just like an average person that's thrown into extreme circumstances, whether it's the Nada character played by Roddy Piper from They Live, or the MacReady character from The Thing. It could be me or you in that situation. So that's something that you see in a lot of his films, and he's done a lot of interviews as well. There's a pretty good video that's on YouTube, and it was from the early 80s, where he sat with David Cronenberg, who was doing Scanners, I think, at the time, and American Werewolf in London. No, and John Landis, who was doing American Werewolf in London, two horror directors. And they were talking about the horror genre and the history of it and stuff. And John Carpenter brings into it as well something that he's kind of put into a lot of his films, that there's like a left and a right wing of horror. Not as in politics, left, right wing, but more it's like the person sat around the campfire telling the story, the fictional story of the monster. The right wing of horror tells you that the monster is out there and it's coming to get you, whereas the left wing of horror says that the enemy is in there, in the human heart, kind of thing. And that's something that you've seen throughout his movies. So in some of them, the enemy was within, like in They Live. In The Thing. Well, actually, and in They Live as well. It was kind of like part of society. It was in us. It was kind of, we were part of it. And then in other movies, it's the monster is out there. It's Michael Myers. It's something like that, and it's going to get you. So little things like that I think made him an interesting filmmaker, and he tends to have stuck to horror movies. So, right, so obviously another thing that he was big into as well was westerns as well. That was another thing that you kind of see a lot of the themes of his films. So he did some student films that I've not seen. His first major one that was a student film with a massive budget that I have seen many times, Dark Star. Have you ever seen that?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, it was basically Dan O'Bannon had a part of it, and he was a co-writer for, or co-creator of Alien originally. Obviously, kind of morphed after he'd created that thing. You can see parallels between Dark Star, and Alien. It's like people in space, and there's a monster on the ship, kind of thing. But unfortunately, in Dark Star, the monster is literally a beach ball that's been painted and has like kind of like flippers. It's a very low budget movie, kind of tongue in cheek kind of thing. So it's not scary. It's just kind of like weird and silly, but very entertaining, I think. And Dan O'Bannon is in that movie as well. But I'd recommend giving it a watch, but you have to be in the mood for it. That one, I've seen it many times. It's very rewatchable. His second big film, Assault on Precinct 13. We love this film, don't we?
Yes.
Obviously, they've remade it. That film was, he always says, was a remake of Rio Bravo. That was a John Wayne film. So again, his love of westerns you can kind of see in there. And it was a Howard Hawks film. Was Rio Bravo? He was a famous western director. And the concept of Assault on Precinct 13, you've got this guy who's been hunted down by a street gang. He seeks refuge in Precinct 13, which is a police precinct which has actually been shut down. And there's only a few people in there, skeleton crew with limited weaponry, and they have to fight off this street gang that's willing to die for their cause, which is to get revenge on this guy that the police have taken in to protect. So very good film, and quite low budget, but that doesn't harm it in any way. So yeah, let's say we both like that one.
Yes.
His first major film, first major hit movie was Halloween, and that was the next one that he did after that, 1978. Not really much to say about it, really, is there? It was kind of the new sort of wave of slasher movies, I guess, kind of laid a lot of the groundwork for what would come after with boogeyman type horror movies. Obviously, there was one called Black Christmas, I think, that came out maybe the year before with Margot Kidder and a few others. That sometimes gets credited as like the first major slasher movie because it came before this, but I don't think it was as memorable as Halloween was. So obviously, I've talked about that movie many times on the channel, so I won't cover that too much.
It was White Christmas.
That was the toughest movie. No, next film was a TV movie called Someone's Watching Me. Not a terribly easy movie to track down if you want to get like a physical copy. I think I got like a bootleg copy. But that was another one. Basically, got a woman who's been stalked and she lives in like an apartment building. It's all right. It's definitely a John Carpenter movie, but it's kind of like a lesser version of some of the other films that he's done. But I give it a watch just out of interest. Presumably, you've not seen that one.
Doesn't ring a bell, no.
Yeah. His next film was Elvis. I haven't seen that one, but it had Kurt Russell. It marked the first film that he would do with Kurt Russell. I believe it was a TV movie that did get a limited cinema release as well. You can get that. I've just never got around to watching it. I should do, really. But then his next film, 1980, The Fog. We've talked about that on the channel before.
Yes.
A few years ago, we did a Halloween special on that. Again, Jamie Lee Curtis came back. I think it was one of the first films that she'd done after Halloween, actually. She didn't really get much work between those two films. That's what she said, anyway. So, pretty good film, quite effective stuff. Like I say, we've talked about it in other videos. Again, it got remade fairly in last 15 years or so. After that, he kind of went from the horror genre to the sort of action thriller genre, Escape from New York. Don't think we've actually done any videos on that. I did one years ago, but obviously Kurt Russell, slightly bigger budget movie. Again, Snake Plissken, iconic character. Any quotes you want to throw out from that film?
I think I'm quoted out for this point.
Yeah. His next film, anyway, again, we've talked about many times. What is it to say about it? The Thing, again, was with Kurt Russell. We talked about it last year and the year before, so let's skip that one. Watch those videos if you want to hear us talking about that, because we did a lot of stuff talking about that. The next film, Christine, I talked about that in my Halloween Ends review because of some connectivity with that, just because they evidently based one of the characters on the Arnie Cunningham character from the film Christine. Basically, it's about a car that's kind of got a mind of its own and it's evil. Stephen King wrote the book that John Carpenter based the movie on. I think the movie came out before the book did, actually. Yeah, you like the film Christine, don't you?
I haven't seen it for fucking yonks.
Well, yeah, because I was going to suggest doing a video about that. Yeah, and I mentioned it to you, and then because I thought it was one that you'd seen many times and you remembered, but yeah, it's a decent film. Like, it's got a good soundtrack to it as well. It's set in the late 70s, came out in the early 80s. I don't know why they didn't just set it in the early 80s, because it was only a few years before it was actually set. But it's got like a bit of a theme of the 1950s, because that's when the car was made, and it only plays like rock and roll music from the 50s. So little things like that kind of make it memorable. His next film, probably one of my least favorite of his films. It's a good film, but I don't know, it kind of sticks out. Starman in 1984. It was basically one that he did because he got a stick after he did The Thing. Because obviously E.T. came out the same year as The Thing. So by contrast, The Thing was seen as very nihilistic and very mean-spirited. I think it was misunderstood. And he missed out on some projects. He was going to do the Philadelphia Experiment. He was going to do Fire. What's the one with Drew Barrymore? Is it Firewalker or something? Or Firestarter? Firestarter, I think.
Yeah.
He was supposed to direct that, from what I understood, and he lost these projects because The Thing flopped quite a bit, because The Thing was a big studio movie. And after that, his reputation, because the film flopped, was kind of went down the toilet for a few years. So to kind of repent that, he did Starman. And then 2 years later, Big Trouble in Little China, awesome film. But again, underappreciated. Kurt Russell was in that. It was a big hit on video, and people watched it on TV like we did. But didn't do very well, and unfortunately, it was a big studio movie with 20th Century Fox. So again, because that movie failed, his reputation went downhill. It wasn't a horror film. It had some like themes of things that you might see in horror movies, but it was kind of like an action comedy, wasn't it?
Yes.
He's playing this kind of John Wayne type character, because if you watch Escape from New York, his character is very similar to sort of Clint Eastwood in the spaghetti westerns, Snake Plissken character, whereas Jack Burton is more the John Wayne end of the cowboy archetype, and then talks very much like a very quotable film, that as well. What was that thing about you change it to Entofa grabs you by the scruff of the neck or something and buff?
I don't know. I can't pull that one off the top of my head, because that was quite a bit of...
It was a very specific line, that, wasn't it? So have you paid your dues, buff?
You say yes, sir. The check's in the mail.
So that was 86, 87, Prince of Darkness. We did a review talking about that. I'm sure you want to do it.
News for you, Buff, and you're not going to like it.
Yeah. So we talked about that, so I won't cover it here. You can go watch that video. But I love that film. It's very creepy, very slow burner. And some pretty good, interesting stuff they did with it. Again, that was a lower budget film with a smaller studio, because that was after the flop that was Big Trouble in Little China with 20th Century Fox. So the next few films he did were like that. He did They Live in 1988. Bit of a lower budget movie again, but they made a lot of use out of what they did, and seen as being again one of his best films with Roddy Piper. So that's the one with the glasses. You put the glasses on and everything you see is different. It's all black and white, and these subliminal messages and aliens or whatever the hell they are, they're living amongst us. So if that's a horror, that's again, it's the left wing of horror. That's the aliens. That's the enemy within kind of thing. It's not out there coming to get you. It's like right with you. It's living next to you. It's literally in bed on top of you as well. No, it was under the woman, I think, at the end of that film when it ends. Hey, what's wrong?
Yeah, well, you know, Buff and Topher had a moment like that.
Kill me. Yeah, so I was 88.
Put on the glasses, Buff. We warned you.
Well, it would have covered part of his face at the very least. But,
So a bit of an intermission here. Now I'm just going to cover my physical media collection of John Carpenter movies to finish off part 1. Part 2 we're going to come back after that, continue the conversation with the core, and then finish things completely for this Halloween special by talking about my soundtrack collection for John Carpenter movies and film scores on record. Right, so here I am in the Brandex Reviews video rental room, and for this one, like I say, I'm just going to kind of cover my physical media collection of John Carpenter DVDs, Blu-rays and 4K discs. Now, I've talked about the Halloween ones quite extensively previously, so I'll kind of cut past that, but for now, this is my collection. Most of it's on DVD. I've got some of the new trilogy here in on 4K Blu-ray. So you've got the original film, and you've got the two new ones that came out since 2018, and then the third one will be coming out. So that'll probably occupy a space right there if I buy that when it comes out. And then the rest of the movies, I've got Halloween 3 on Blu-ray, which was I think it was an import. The other ones I just kept on DVD. Not a huge fan of those movies for the most part. Got a different version of Halloween with a lenticular cover, which was pretty cool. And I think this one has the TV version on it as well, which is quite interesting. So, yeah, that's interesting to have. That's a Halloween collection anyway. So, obviously, it's Halloween. So if you're looking for some John Carpenter movies and you're a physical media collector, well, it's a little bit late because it's Halloween night. So I don't know what to tell you. But some recommendations, here you go. So this is the rest of my physical media collection, and I'm going to get into each one that I've got. Like I say, I'm not reviewing the actual films for this part. This is just a quick look at my collection, because it's quite unique, because I've got certain versions for different reasons. For example, Ghosts of Mars. I don't know if it's fully available now on Blu-ray, but I remember when I was trying to get this, it wasn't easily available in shops like HMV, for example, so I had to get an imported version of it. But it plays fine anyway. So that's Ghosts of Mars. Not everyone's favourite John Carpenter film, but whatever, that's the version I have. Then you've got Vampires as well. Again, just a standard release of that on Blu-ray. Starman. Not a huge fan of this one. It was okay, but obviously I got a second hand. Someone's Watching Me. This is one that we're going to mention. I think we've already mentioned it at this point in the video for this two-part video, but I got this one bootlegged back in the early 2000s. I think there are some imported versions out there, but I can't say whether or not those work brilliantly, because sometimes imported versions you get language issues, subtitle issues. Sometimes you can't get rid of the subtitles, for example. But anyway, Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I think I've got this on Blu-ray as well somewhere in this collection, but I do have the DVD as well. From memory, I kept the DVD because it's got some extra features on here that aren't on the actual Blu-ray itself. Now, obviously, he did that Masters of Horror series. You might remember that as like a mini-series, and he did a couple of episodes of that. If you don't want to own the full box sets of those, because they are quite big, and they've got a lot of other things in there as well, it might not interest you. If it's just the John Carpenter stuff, you can get his 2 episodes. I think one was called Pro-Life, I think it was called, and the other one was called Cigarette Burns. This is Cigarette Burns. I think the Pro-Life one was an imported one that I got. I don't know if that got like a proper DVD release in the UK like Cigarette Burns did. So for whatever reason, I got this one anyway. So that's got that in there. Though, like I said, those were TV episodes that he did kind of following his semi-retirement in the early 2000s. I'll just move these out of the way. Moving on, there was The Ward, which was one of his last films that he did. Had Amber Heard, not a very nice person. I wasn't a big fan of that film, but whatever. In the Mouth of Madness, I think this might have had a proper release in more recent times, but I bought this a few years ago when it was difficult to get hold of on Blu-ray. I remember it was even difficult to get on DVD at one point. For the longest time, I had this film on videotape. I think I'd even copied it onto a DVD disc at one point. For some reason, this film's fairly underrated, but this is the version of In the Mouth of Madness that I've got anyway. I do think it has had a bit more of a widespread release recently, so might not be necessary if you wanted to buy it to get this version, but there you go. Body Bags, this is an interesting one as well. Again, I think this might have had a more proper release, at least in the UK in recent times on Blu-ray. Similar deal, for the longest time you could only get this on videotape, but obviously we covered this, what it is and so on in the review itself, but this is the physical media version that I own. Black Moon Rising, he didn't direct this one. I haven't actually mentioned this in the video that I've done with the core, but he did write this, and it's quite an interesting film. It's an entertaining watch. It's got Linda Hamilton from The Terminator and Tommy Lee Jones. Arrow Video did a pretty good release of this. The transfer of it is decent looking. It's got Robert Vaughn in it as well, so pretty good science fiction movie anyway. So if you're looking for something to complete your collection and you've got all of John Carpenter's films that he directed, I'd consider this one because it is pretty good. Now, anyway, Christine, got this in 4K. I had to get this imported. Looks pretty good in 4K. It is on Dolby Vision. Good film anyway. I've got a Blu-ray version of Memoirs of an Invisible Man. Again, I don't know if this has got a proper release in the UK on Blu-ray, or at least it didn't a few years ago, so I opted for this imported version, and it plays just fine. Village of the Damned, the remake that he did, very good film. Generic UK Blu-ray release there. Not an actual John Carpenter film, but obviously the originals, Village of the Damned and Children of the Damned, that his remake was based on. I own these on DVD. I think there are some Blu-rays, at least of one of these, that you can get in like a platinum edition that HMV released, so they should be pretty good. I might upgrade sometime, I don't know. Moving on, Rio Bravo, not a John Carpenter film, but this is the film by Howard Hawks. Similar situation with obviously the original version of The Thing that Howard Hawks worked on. Rio Bravo is the film that John Carpenter states he based Assault on Precinct 13 on. So if you want to check that out, I'm not a huge fan of John Wayne, to be honest, but that was a pretty good film, I can't deny it. The remake of Assault on Precinct 13, very good as far as remakes go, especially John Carpenter film remakes. This one was very entertaining, I really liked it. Assault on Precinct 13, the original version, it looks like a 4K disc because of the black top, but it's not, it's just a general Blu-ray release. I think this has had a few different versions released over the years, might have different Blu-ray edition as well, but that's the one that I own anyway. Dark Star, obviously that was one of his first films that he did. It was like a student movie. Blu-ray looks pretty good. Now these ones are really nice. This is what I was kind of wanting to show you on this. So let me just pause this 1 second so I can get these in a different light. So these are the steelbooks that got released. Now I have to thank Buff for this, because when these movies got released a few years ago on 4K for the first time, they were quite expensive, and they were in these big box sets with a load of unnecessary things like stickers and so on, just to kind of bump up the price. Well, these were actually cheaper at the time anyway. I think they were a Zavvi exclusive, although they are a bit more easier to get hold of through other means now. But they were very nice. As far as steelbooks go, I'm not usually a big fan, but these are very nice. I do like these a lot. So they have some very nice artwork on them. In no way boring at all. They do come with these kind of L-shaped, that's why they call them L-shaped, info cards as well that come with them. They're always awkward, these kind of things, but at least it kind of indicates there what you get on them. But like I say, this isn't a comprehensive review of all these kind of things, but as I say, these are kind of the nicer things in this collection. So there you go. Those are the steelbooks of those anyway. And then finishing off the collection, these are the Kurt Russell related ones. So I haven't actually watched this one yet. It's fairly recently purchased by me. Escape from LA got a 4K release. So a couple of different versions. This one was about £35 from memory, because it had, again, just this stuff that isn't really necessary, stickers and so on. It's like, seriously. So they kind of released this kind of overpriced box set as well as a standard version for about £35. The standard version was about 20. Didn't take long for this version to come down to about the same price, because I don't think this movie really was well liked. I love this film, to be honest, so I didn't mind buying it, but I'm glad I waited until it came down to a bit more of a realistic price anyway. So anyway, I've got a few different versions of Escape from New York. I've got this version as well. Obviously, I had the 4K disc that I was just showing you, but I do also have this Blu-ray version that I got imported. I've got the DVD of Escape from LA as well. I have the DVD of Escape from New York as well, which this was the first decent version that you could get on DVD. There was one that came out sort of late 90s in the UK, but it was very bad quality. We got this special edition around about 2005 after a long wait, I seem to remember, on that one. So that did eventually come out. Big Trouble in Little China. There's no 4K version of this yet, as far as I'm aware, or anything that's been announced from what I understand. But Arrow Video did a very nice release of this a few years ago. Lots of extra features, so if you're a fan of this movie, definitely consider upgrading to this if you've not got it. The Thing, so again, similar to that Big Trouble in Little China, Arrow Video did a release of this version of The Thing. I say this version, it was just this print of The Thing, with loads of extra features on there, some of which was exclusive to the Arrow Video release. There is a 4K version of The Thing as well, which is very nice, came out last year, 2021. The 1982 and 2011 movie are contained in this box set here. Then one of the first DVDs I ever bought, literally, it was like a day after I bought my first ever DVD player back in '99. Of course, it's one of my favourite films, so I opted for The Thing. So I've kept this for sentimental reasons. Then finally, we've got the original that it's based on, which has an audio commentary by John Carpenter. So this is the 1950s version. And it also has a colorized version. And then we've got the Blu-ray of that as well. So that's the collection. The video ended a little bit abruptly, but whatever. This video continues in part 2, which is available now. The conversation continues.